Good evening. It starts with a math teacher inside one of Manhattan's most elite private schools. And it ends with a global scandal, a federal case, and right now, millions of pages of newly released government records that are forcing the public to revisit a question that has never fully gone away. How did Jeffrey Epstein go from the classroom to extraordinary wealth and elite access, while so much of his financial life remained difficult to trace in the public record? Tonight, we're walking through the documented timeline of Epstein's rise, step by step. We'll also explain what's new in the latest federal file releases now being posted online. Here's what we know. Jeffrey Epstein was born in Brooklyn He attended college but did not complete a degree. And yet, in 1974, Epstein landed a teaching job at the Dalton School in Manhattan, a rare position at a prestigious institution with deep ties to influential families. That detail matters, because Dalton didn't just give him a job, it gave him proximity. Proximity to wealth, proximity to power, and proximity to the kind of social networks that can quietly shape opportunity. Within 2 years, Epstein made a leap that would become the foundation of his public image for decades. In 1976, he left Dalton and joined Bear Stearns, a major Wall Street investment bank. He began in a junior role and moved into work connected to complex trading and high net worth clients, an environment where relationships can matter as much as credentials. But here's what stands out. Epstein did not have the typical resume for Wall Street. No completed degree, no long record in finance. So how did he move so quickly into that world? Bear Stearns became his first major credential, and it's a credential Epstein would lean on as he built his reputation as a discreet advisor to the wealthy. In 1981, Epstein left Bear Stearns. The firm has said he departed following a policy issue, though the full details were never widely disclosed publicly. And this is where the timeline becomes harder to track. After leaving one of the most powerful firms in the country, Epstein did not disappear. He built a private financial operation of his own. In the early 1980s, Epstein launched a consulting and wealth management business. Over time, he described it as exclusive, claiming he worked only for clients worth at least $1 billion. That claim signals status. But it also raises a basic question that still follows this story. Who were those clients, and what exactly was Epstein doing for them? Private wealth management can operate with limited transparency. And in Epstein's case, the public paper trail around his business was thin compared with the scale of his lifestyle. Still, one financial relationship is repeatedly cited as among the most documented in Epstein's rise: his association with retail billionaire Leslie Wexner. Court filings and reporting have described Epstein obtaining unusually deep access to Wexner's financial world, including at one point power of attorney, a rare level of authority for an outside advisor. Wexner has said he later severed ties and described himself as a victim of Epstein's misconduct. But for Epstein, that association carried something valuable: credibility. And in elite spaces, credibility can translate into access. By the 1990s and early 2000s, Epstein's wealth appeared unmistakable. He acquired high-value properties, including a large townhouse in Manhattan, a mansion in Palm Beach, and a ranch in New Mexico. And in 1998, he purchased Little St. James in the U.S., Virgin Islands, a private island that would later become one of the clearest symbols of his wealth and notoriety. At the same time, Epstein built a different kind of asset: social access. He cultivated relationships with academics and institutions. He made donations. He hosted private dinners. He positioned himself as a connector, someone who could bring people into rooms they could not easily enter on their own. And he appeared repeatedly around prominent public figures. A key point here: being listed in a contact book, appearing in a photo, or showing up in a record does not prove criminal wrongdoing by anyone else. Many people later described limited or professional contact. But the pattern still matters for understanding his rise. Epstein wasn't just accumulating money. He was accumulating proximity to power and using that proximity to reinforce the image of legitimacy. Then the timeline takes a sharp turn. In 2005, law enforcement in Florida opened an investigation after allegations emerged that Epstein had sexually abused underage girls. That investigation led to a legal outcome that remains one of the most criticized moments in this case. In 2008, Epstein entered a plea agreement in Florida state court and pleaded guilty to charges that included solicitation and solicitation involving a minor. He served about 13 months in a county jail, including a work release arrangement that allowed him to leave for much of the day. The deal drew heavy criticism at the time, and years later, additional legal scrutiny over how victims were treated during the process. And this is the point many observers still view as pivotal. After that conviction, Epstein still retained extraordinary resources, properties, travel, and a network that was not fully dismantled. So how did he continue operating in a world built on private introductions and private money? In part because much of that world is not public. And Epstein's business model was built on discretion. Fast forward to 2019. Federal prosecutors in New York arrested Epstein and charged him with sex trafficking and conspiracy. He pleaded not guilty. Then, on August 10, 2019, Epstein was found dead in his jail cell while awaiting trial. The medical examiner ruled his death a suicide. Federal reviews later documented serious failures inside the facility, fueling lasting public scrutiny. Epstein's death ended the criminal case against him, but the broader legal story continued. In 2021, Epstein's longtime associate Ghislaine Maxwell was convicted in federal court for her role in recruiting and grooming minors for Epstein. She was sentenced to 20 years in prison, and in October 2025, the U.S. Supreme Court declined to hear Maxwell's appeal, leaving that conviction and sentence intact. Now to what's new and why Epstein is back in the headlines right now. Last year, Congress passed a law requiring the Justice Department to release a large archive of Epstein-related investigative material. With redactions intended to protect victims and sensitive information, the department created an online repository, what it calls an Epstein library, and has been posting records in batches. In late January, the Justice Department announced a major new release, more than 3 million pages of documents, along with thousands of videos and a large collection of images, posted publicly with redactions. But the release has drawn criticism from survivors' advocates and attorneys, who say some victim information was not fully protected, even as other portions were heavily redacted. Lawmakers have also demanded fuller access to the files. The Justice Department has said members of Congress will be allowed to review unredacted versions in a controlled setting. And there is another detail that matters in separating documented fact from internet rumor. According to reporting on an internal Justice Department review, investigators did not find a definitive client list among the evidence collected, despite the way that phrase has circulated online for years. So what does this timeline tell us? It shows an unusual rise: early access through elite education, a rapid move into high finance, a private wealth operation that remained largely opaque, and a social strategy built on proximity to power. It also shows why this story still resonates, because even now, as millions of pages of records are released, some of the most basic questions people ask about Epstein's wealth, who paid him, how he built it, and how he protected it, remain only partially answered in public view. And that is why this timeline matters, not because of conspiracy, but because it is a documented case study in how money and access can grow in the shadows and how accountability can come far later than the warning signs. Even now, years later, parts of the story remain locked in documents the public has yet to see. For continuing updates as additional records are released, make sure you're subscribed. We'll continue to follow developments as more information becomes available. Thank you for watching.